All right? Okay. 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 So good afternoon, members of the media. Thanks for being here this afternoon at our MSJ Media Conference. It's good to welcome to the South some of our media colleagues from the North, from TV6. Welcome to South. We are going to make a major announcement today with respect to an upcoming event that the party is going to be having. And I'm going to ask our deputy political leader, Ms. Radhika Goldmans, who's to my left, to make that announcement. And of course, we have Mr. Clyde Callender to my right, who's the International Relations Officer of the party. And after Ms. Goldmans makes the announcement, then of course, we are open to questions on and requesting comments on any other matters that you may wish to have. I decided not to make a major statement on other issues because there's so many floating around in the national stratosphere, if you wish. But we, of course, are open to all of your questions and any of your questions after the announcement. So perhaps the easiest thing to do would be for Ms. Goldmans to switch, or you...
We can switch over here.
Yes, okay, good. Chairs, right, because this chair's-
Mike? The executive of the Movement for Social Justice have made a decision that we are going to host our National Assembly on November the 25th, 2018. The purpose of the National Assembly is to invite members, supporters, and even well-wishers to come together in preparation for 2019 local government election and 2020 general election. This is important for us against the backdrop of the current situation in this country, where we see constant disapproval and disappointment being expressed by the citizens of this country against our ruling government, the PNM and the UNC. We will announce the venue in due course. This invitation is extended to even non-members who are willing to join the MSJ or come and hear what we have to say. What happens there is that the regions will present their reports on their activities over the last year.
So from what you're saying, the MSJ will be contesting all the districts, regional areas in the local government election, and also all of the constituencies in the general election.
General election, that's correct.
So in terms of financing and funding, how do you plan to get the required funding for something of that nature?
Well, our policy doesn't encompass big financing like what one would experience with the PNM or the UNC. We are financed by the people. We do fundraising, they make their contribution, and we even have a limit as to how much an individual can contribute to the party.
Realistically speaking, how can any party successfully contest any national election without the big pocket financiers, as they call it?
Well, if you look at investment in terms of T-shirts and what you may want to give out, the goodies, well, then you're correct. But MSJ is not about that, because then you begin to owe people. And this is the price we have been paying over the years of party financing. It is a lot of paraphernalia that is given out that is not really required for general elections.
Will the MSJ be able to host rallies and political meetings on motorcades and those type of things that are usually done during an election campaign?
We have done it in the past, and yes, I think we could do it again.
And also, if you look at the political landscape as it stands now, do you think, because there's been this constant conversation about a third course, whether in fact it makes a difference or whether it just pulls votes to benefit one of the other major parties that are either in office or in opposition? What is your view on that?
Well, the MSJs, we see ourselves as the alternative. There is only one party existing right now. They're just the flip side of the same. So you have the UNC and the PNM, they are the same. So we are really the second party, the real alternative. We are option that people are looking for.
Yes, but when it comes to governments and during the think that the energy could, attract people back to the polls or even take the votes, the traditional votes from those parties?
The state of affairs right now in this country, what we have seen unfold in the last few months by the PNM government and the silence of the UNC, I think people are beginning to think about it because the voter turnout has been very low because disenchantment with the existing parties. And I think somehow with the situation that has happened, especially with the petrol trend, that you have seen the race issue actually went a little bit cold and people began thinking class. And then the whole distrust with the PNM, all the lies that have been given out to us in the past concerning Petrotrin, people are really feeling it. And you see it on Facebook. And even the silent people are now beginning to speak out.
What is the ideology of the MSJ that would be so different to the other traditional parties? And I mean, with regards to, your base low parties, one particular race, I mean, how does the energy really say such? I mean, do you think that Trinidad is ready for a socialist movement?
Perhaps I could respond to that.
Just my quote.
Okay, all right. We'll just wait for Hollis to shift the camera. Thanks. Well, it's interesting you ask what the ideology is. I was actually asked that question, and I can't comment more than just reporting what happened in the industrial court on Wednesday when Senior Counsel Sinas Jairam, representing the Attorney General, asked me what is my ideology. It was an unusual question for the industrial court matter. And I would comment on why I think he asked the question, obviously. But my answer was very simple, and the same question you're asking. And I was actually asked that question in my conversation with, on my radio program, the Take Two radio program just an hour or so ago on I-95 in conversation with Natalie Gore. And our ideology is social justice. And social justice is, in fact, embedded in the preamble to the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'll just quote it so that I have the actual words. And most people you see in Trinidad and Tobago don't know this, but the preamble says, "We affirm our respect for the principles of social justice and therefore believe that the operation of the economic system should result in the material resources of the community being so distributed as to subserve the common good, that there should be adequate means of livelihood for all, that labor should not be exploited or forced by economic necessity to operate in inhumane conditions, but that there should be advancement on the basis of recognition of merit, ability, and integrity." That's a very strong philosophical or ideological position, which is the position that all of us as Trinidadians, Tobagonians are supposed to believe in, because this is what our Constitution says is the ideal. So what does that say? Social justice means no discrimination on the basis of race or religion or gender or age or where you live or any such other factor. Social justice means that wealth and power and money must not give you advantage over others who don't have wealth and money and so on. Social justice means that the criminal justice system must be fair so that people who engaged in white-collar crime must go to jail and not get free or just roam free to continue doing what they're doing, while a young man or woman with 2 sticks of ganja ends up in jail for 6 years and things like that. Social justice means an education system where everybody really has a fair and equal chance, not where 40% of our young people are failing CSEC or can't get jobs and so on when they graduate. A healthcare system where it is not a question of money or your life and so on. And of course, the economic system must operate so that the material resources, the oil, the gas, the land, and so on, must serve the common good, not benefit simply of 5 or 10% at the top of the wealth and income of the country. So that's what we believe in. And that does not exist in Trinidad and Tobago, which is why we are in politics, to change the system so we could get social justice.
On a separate note, what I wanted to ask you, since the aftermath of the floods on Greenville, One is how houses will be distributed. One is whether the EHTC had permission and approval for certain projects which have resulted in flooding. We see Coconut Grove and other places on the arrow. There are issues with the EHTC. Is there a thought overhaul of how the EHTC conducts its business and the influence of politicians in how the EHTC operates?
Yeah, it's very clear, first of all, that we don't have a proper housing policy in Trinidad and Tobago. And we also don't have a proper policy for land use and development. And therefore, if we had proper policies for land use and the enforcement of those policies, it would mean that housing should not be constructed in certain parts of the country if that land is allocated explicitly for like agriculture and so on, or is not suitable for housing because of its risk to flooding and natural disasters such as that. So we don't have proper policies and we don't have enforcement of even the policies that do exist. In the case of HEC, quite clearly, the Greenvale story was a horrible saga of abuse because Town and Country had a very clear position that there should be no houses constructed there, but yet houses were constructed without Town and Country approval. Clearly that was a political decision, perhaps to win votes, and we might also find party financiers and others getting tied up in those decisions and so on. So that is one major area that needs to be addressed. Land use policy, housing policy, enforcement of policies and laws.
Another thing we have found that the contractors, like say for instance in Wellington Gardens, residents are supposed to be moved out. A recommendation was made to the residents to move out because the houses themselves are structurally sound. Even in Taruba, the old housing developments, there are walls moving. In Union Hall, there was a situation where residents were told that the mush trainees were used to carry out certain works, and those works are actually falling apart right now.
I have actually been asked by quite a number of residents, some residents, and I took up this issue in 2015 perhaps, and in 2016 the HDC agreed to relocate about 4 or 5 homeowners because of structural defects in the apartments, townhouses, or houses that they happen to have been allocated and in which they've been living for a number of years. There's still residual matters with respect to those people being reallocated or removed and transferred to other units. In one case, somebody has not yet been moved, although the land to the back, in fact in Taruba, fell maybe 8 feet because of land slippage and so on, and is a clear threat to their home. In the case of certain persons in Edinburgh, 500, they were relocated, but the very places to which they were relocated also have defects. There are other people I know in Lionsgate who have been trying to get relocated because every time it rains, the apartment or townhouse that they're living in fills up with water, and all the remedial efforts have not resulted in any relief to that particular person. So, yes, the HEC very clearly over the years had major problems with quality control and quality assurance with respect to contractors who were paid very large amounts of money and who delivered faulty, slipshod, bad work. And of course, the people who are suffering as a result of that are persons who are living. Up to a week ago, I got another call from somebody asking me to see if I could assist in that. And I've had some success, but not full success in terms of that. So I'm aware of it. I've visited homes and I've taken up matters on behalf of residents who have just been at their wits' end because of faulty workmanship. So I'm aware of those problems.
There's some people who are complaining about something that's quality of fuel. They're saying that this fuel burning faster. The government says that there is no truth to any rumor that this is associated with any imported fuel, since only Wednesday Petrotrain got its first shipment of fuel as part of the restructuring and refining. Given your association, of course, with issues with Petrotrin. Do you think that there's any situation, if it's not really important to as the government is saying, and people are complaining about the fuel, and NP and Uniped sell the fuel they get from Petrotrin, isn't that there's something happening at Petrotrin as it is now going through the final stages of the closure of the refinery?
It's quite possible. There are several issues in this regard, and I have to talk about some matters that are not related to the court matter because I was a witness in it, as you know. First of all, the country has to be, well, has been told two stories because Minister Young, I think, said only last Wednesday, but there were statements coming out of Petrotrin itself which said that the first shipment of fuel, if not from the government, and you all could just fact check that, came in the last week of October. So if you fact check, somebody is not telling the truth as to when the first shipment arrived, okay? And was one of the problems of this Petrotrin story is that the narrative and the goalposts have shifted all the time. It's never been a consistent narrative. There are some questions that the country must ask. Who imported the fuel? Was it Petrotrin? Was it Paria? We don't know who imported the fuel. Did whoever imported the fuel have a license under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago to import the fuel? What is the pricing arrangement with respect to the fuel that has been imported? Because the price prior to Petrotrin's closure would have been ex-refinery price out of Point-à-Pierre, and then without markup going to NP for onward sale to NP and to Unipet and so on. And of course, the government has particular taxes on that and so on, like the road tax and matters like that, and subsidy. Now, in the case of imported fuel, the trader from whom the fuel is being purchased would obviously have a markup above ex-refinery price, wherever they bought it. Then there's terminaling costs here, and then the question of the common external tariff, which ought to apply. Was that applied in this case? Has the government gone to COTED, the Council of Trade and Economic Development of CARICOM, for a waiver of the taxes, the CET on imported fuel? And what are all of those add-on costs going to do to the price that NP has to and Unipet have to pay? And therefore, is the subsidy not going to be increased? So there are a whole series of issues there which have to be addressed. We also have to ask the question, because BP, one of the BP subsidiaries, was the supplier of the fuel. Mr. Robert Riley, ex-BP, is a consultant, an advisor to the board, and was running ENP for the last 8 or 9 months. Ms. Lisa Ali, who's head of the transition team, so-called, ex-BP. Mr. Nigel Campbell, I think that's his name, who is the chief financial officer, ex-BP. And the question the country has to begin to, questions that people have to ask, I don't know if there's a relationship, I'm just saying that these are facts, and one has to know about that. And then we don't know what is the state of the lab at Petrotrin with the whole closure and so on, that would normally do testing, and Clyde Callender would have worked in custody transfer, which would have dealt with the fuel stored and then going out, but it's normally tested by the lab and so on. And NP would also have to do tests and so on. So we're not sure what is going on, whether the quality assurances are still in place, given all of given the closure of the refinery.
Are you concerned of the possibility that any one person, or more than one person, given the fact that there's a situation, the closure of the refinery, losing jobs, people may be disenchanted or disenfranchised or disgruntled, but possibly anybody could be behind something like that at the refinery?
No, not at all, not at all. It's quite amazing, for example, and I think we must say to the Petrotrin workers who are faced with imminent job loss, that they have been magnificent in the fact that they have continued to work under circumstances which are extremely trying, will be putting it mildly, traumatized environment with facing the lack of employment, with facing severance packages which are not enhanced in any way. It is purely what is required under the collective agreement and so on. And still having to go about doing work to shut down the very operations which are going to result in their job loss. Most people would not be able to do that, but they have done that, and that to me is an indication of the type of worker that the pedestrian worker is and has been all the years, but who have been demonized by this government and by other citizens out of the lack of knowledge and so on, but demonized by the government and so on. And that, to me, that demonizing of those workers is one of the injustices which Rowley's government will never, ever live down, and we will make sure that the country never forgets.
Does the MSJ have a position on this issue concerning the charges under the Anti-Terrorism Act and sedition charge against a 22-year-old man concerning a post on Facebook? The posting of itself, of course, will have raised concerns, I guess, on many different levels. But with the amendment to the Anti-Terrorism Act, Section 14, proclaimed just in August, adding a $25 million fine to a 25-year maximum sentence, do you think that the government should revisit this? Or do you think when it comes to concerns about issues of terrorism or threats of terrorism, this law is being applied appropriately in this case?
Well, I can't say whether the law is being applied appropriately in this case. I myself didn't see the posts, and the posts have not been reported in the media, as far as I'm aware. And therefore, I cannot say whether the facts are commensurate with the charges that have been laid. That is now going to be a matter for the courts to determine. And one of the problems, however, is that our judicial system, I was making reference to the point earlier, our criminal justice system is very badly broken. So it is not likely that this matter is going to be completed within a number of years, because we'll have to go to the preliminary inquiry stage at the magistrate's court, and if a prima facie case is made out and the magistrate thinks there's a prima facie case, it will then go to the assizes, the High Court, and we don't know when that will be determined. So I can't say whether the facts of this case are commensurate with the charges. There are two things. One is that I think that acts of terrorism are issues that must be of concern to Trinidad and Tobago. It's something that happens all over the world, and we are not going to be immune from it. In fact, we have had it before, and so we have to be concerned about it. But at the same time, I think this is a warning, and this is not the first one, but in terms of social media use. The first one with respect to the anti-terrorism law, but there have been other cases in the courts recently, one with respect to someone posting up something that the court, and that was heard by the High Court, that was deemed to be equivalent to libel, and so the person was in fact convicted of libel and had to pay penalties. And there was another case, of course, where someone posted up inappropriate photographs of a third person, well, another person, without that person's permission, and was also found guilty. So I think that social media use, now people have to be more careful about social media use, because quite clearly the laws and the courts are determining the boundaries and limitations of what may be considered appropriate social media use.
In terms of public statements and things like that nature.
Yes.
There's also something else I'm wondering about. As you mentioned in your announcement earlier, anti-labor movement, the MSJ, of course, UK all the labor movement, part of the partnership and so on. The MSJ has divorced from the partnership. But with the MSJ in contesting the national elections that will follow the next 2 years, will there be that large participation of the labor movement, or how will that work for the MSJ?
Well, you know, increasingly, workers are recognizing, that's the point that Radhika was making, is that the politics of race and religion and so on, that type of politics is not in their interests, not in their economic and social interests. And I think workers are coming around more and more, and I'm hearing that from my interaction with workers, not only in the OWTO, but other workers and so on, are recognizing that the issues really are about ideology, if you wish, philosophy. In other words, which party can best represent their interests. And not just workers who are part of organized trade unions, but working people generally. In other words, who has taken up issues to defend workers who are not unionized, who are being exploited in one way or the other? Which party takes up there? Which party is committed to amend the laws to defend those workers? The MSJ is. So I think that increasingly, as we get closer to the elections, the issues will become fundamental and less the issue of race and religion or the old personality bashing that has gone on in the politics of this country of who thief more than who, which is really the argument between the PNM and the UNC. Who thief more than who? Both of them thief, and really and both of them have maintained the system that has kept the majority of the people disenfranchised and out of a decent life, and the majority of people want a decent life and are saying, okay, who is best placed to do that? I think more people are saying MSJ is best placed to do that.
Is there one other question for you, sir? I don't know if you can answer it because of the matter in court, but is the MSJ concerned about, because we've seen an executive hire for one of the companies that is to be a subsidiary of this new holding company, that Petrotrin, the legacy items will be a subsidiary of. Because one of the things one of the rationale given by the government, one of the reasons closing Petrotrin down and starting over as a route was the cost of employment and so on. And we see that this executive has been hired. Yes, the salary touted, we have it confirmed.
Well, I think it's confirmed because the Prime Minister made a statement in Parliament on Friday on the Prime Minister's questions to the Prime Minister. I think that is where the actual figures came out.
And so with that now, thanks for that clarification. With that now, then, are you concerned, or are you now wondering, okay, well then, if the issue of the salary was a major consideration to be paid, and you have that figure confirmed, then are you questioning what is the real motive for the closure of Petrotrin from the standpoint of voting group?
Yes. Well, because the court case, I'm going to constrain my answer if you don't mind, right? After the court judgment, I'll be quite free to speak, or even perhaps after evidence is concluded on Tuesday. But I have never had any doubt in my mind, or I think the MSJ, about the real agenda behind the closure. And we said it long before the court case on many occasions. So I wouldn't bother to repeat that now, about what the real agenda was. And the demonizing of the workers, because if you remember, Mr. Esmine attacked the workers in July, I think it was, of this year, talking about the average worker getting $40-something thousand a month, which is just not true, right? And so you have that situation where there was a demonizing, and then now for an expat, you're prepared to pay, what is it, $400 and something thousand US a year, plus housing, plus other perks, plus, right? And there's no difficulty with that. So it seems as if we are treating different people, different strokes for different folks. And we will have a lot more to say at the National Assembly on the 25th when we talk about the kind of society that Trinidad and Tobago has become under both the PNM and prior to that the UNC, and why we need a different kind of society, and how do we get there? Through the MSJ.